Here we are, back in Magic the Gathering. We're going to talk about another deck here. It's a little bit older. It's one that I was playing before the release of the new set, but it is really, really good. And weirdly enough, it has almost no victory condition. Kind of the point of the deck is to just get people to quit. Quit, deck out, not really be able to play, and then I suppose it has a victory condition, which would just be life. But yeah, it never really gets that far. Most often people just quit up against it. So the deck is blue-black. It's focused on the Dimir guild from the guilds of Ravnica. It has not been updated since the new set, and it is still pretty good. So if you don't have a lot of cards for the new set yet, this is a good option to play. It has a lot of weird things in it. It's not like a usual deck where you've got kind of 4 primary things that you play with and then everything else is just kind of chucked in there. This one is very much just draw cards and have what you need in your hand to counter whatever they're trying to do. So you can take a look at it. Right off the bat, we've got just some early spells that are kind of helpful in a lot of different ways. So Opt is just a card that lets you draw. It's a cheap spell to play turn 1. You get to surveil and then draw, so you essentially get to choose your next card, which can be very useful if you're looking for a specific type of land, if you don't want land, those kind of things. Or if you just have an extra blue mana left over and you want to add another card to your hand, it's a good option. Deadweight is very, very, very helpful in the early game and very unhelpful in the late game, but it's also a really good removal if you have any type of card that's boosting their other guys that might have 2 toughness, and they're not using, so you can't get to it otherwise. Deadweight is a really good way to remove it. It's really good early game if they drop some sort of ramping card like the elves. It's just an easy removal right off the bat, or it can blunt something that you're going up against. It's not an instant, so you have to play it on your turn, which is kind of the weakness here, but otherwise it's a pretty solid card. So the next couple, Blink of the Eye, I only put in there because I kept running into problems where they would essentially seal me away, or they would play some other type of card that holds your cards in exile and you can't get to them unless you can remove their card. So that's all that this does, is it just essentially kicks it back to their hand with the option to draw a card. Enhanced Surveillance, this I put in there because I ran into those discard decks, and you can check my videos previously. We've talked about one of these decks in the past, but this is just kind of and if I can draw it, it's a great card to have, especially because a lot of this does scry, and this allows me to scry 2 deeper. But the real impact here is having this one. If we can play it, the game constantly asks you if you want to do something with it, so it kind of can mask whether or not you have a counter card in your hand, or it kind of lets them think that you might if they're an inexperienced player. So that it can be useful in a lot of different ways. Search for Escanta, everybody says it is a really good card. I don't think I get as much value from it as others, so that's why I only have 1 in here. I kept drawing multiple of them and had really no use. What I've experienced with this is it's a really good target to kind of eat up one of their turns. You throw it down and they'll waste something on it. So if you can get it, you can get it. If you can't, yeah, I've got enough draw in this, otherwise that's not really a big deal. And by the time that this becomes relevant later in the game, usually it's too late for them anyway, so you don't really need the draw. That's not always. There's plenty of games that you'll play where you don't have what you need in the hand, and they manage to just tick you over the edge. Cast Down is great. It's just a removal card for any creature. It's cheap. It's an instant. You can use it at any point. It's really good. Discovery Dispersal is handy in both ways. So the Surveil 2 and draw a card is really good early game, with the Dispersal with that 3 mana or 5 mana, and then it essentially forces them to bring something back to their hand and then discard from their hand. So if they only have one thing down, which if you're playing the deck right, they should only have one thing down and nothing in their hand. So if that hexproof creature comes down, they have to pick it up and then discard it. And you'll see hexproof in this is difficult but not impossible to get around. There's another card in this deck, the Eldest Reborn, which is similar, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Thought Eraser is a great card, lets you look into their hand. If you can get this early in the game, it's great. But it's useful at any point. So if you get it early in the game, you essentially know what their opening hand is and you can play around their opening hand. You can get rid of a threat in their hand, but also having this later in the game, if they're holding something back and you want to know what it is, or you think that they might have a threat in their hand, you can go ahead and play that and discard them. Sinister Sabotage is a pretty good counter. It lets you surveil and counter a spell. It's a little pricey and harder to play around until the later game. 3 mana, if you've played anything else in the turn, up until turn 6 or 7, you might have to hold this back. And it's pretty clear if you're holding back 3 mana for a counter, and they usually don't play anything until you don't have those 2 blue mana. Blood Operative was just kind of a whim throw into this deck, and I found that I really like having him in there. I don't think I'd want more than one, because once you get him, he's hard to get rid of. But essentially, this guy has come in handy a lot when I've gotten low on life, but the board is clear, and it's maybe a burn deck. So either they're going to waste a burn spell on him, at which case I can bring him back into my hand the next time I surveil, or I get the 3 damage life gain off of that. But then his ability is really fantastic. So a lot of those decks that hold those cards off for a jump start, we're talking the burn decks with their what is the one where it forces you to take 4 damage or they get to draw 3 cards? That goes away. You can take any of those cards that they're holding off in reserve for jumpstart and get rid of them. It just exiles them. Or if you know that they're going to be able to dig into their graveyard to pull it back up. So it's really handy to have this guy around. And every time they get rid of him, you get to play him again and do that again. It's a really great card. Disinformation Campaign can be useful, and it can be kind of a pain in the ass. 3 mana is expensive kind of for what it does. Essentially, you drop it, you get to draw a card, and they get to discard. Or they have to discard. So this is really good if you want to kind of mill their hand and get them down so they don't have a lot of options. But it also can be useful if you want to draw. However, you only get the maximum value for that 3 mana if they both have cards to discard and you have cards that you need to draw. Thief of Sanity, again, was kind of a whim that I put in there. It is really, really good. One, because everybody's terrified of this card because it is an actually very scary card. What it does is when you attack them with flying, so of course it's hard to defend against, but if you do damage to their life, essentially they discard 3 cards off the top of their deck, and you get to pick one that you can hold and play at any point, regardless of color or mana. So it's really, really powerful to throw this deck back. And this is one of the victory conditions that this deck might have, in that the deck itself doesn't really have a lot to it, but you can take their victory condition and throw them back. And by the time that you're taking cards from them, usually they quit. But I've gotten things like all kinds of really great spells that I've gotten to throw back at them and saved me a bunch. So in that way, this is really good. But people are terrified of it, and so they will do everything they can to get rid of this card, which just uses up their turns and uses up cards, and it uses up mana. And you'll see that as the game goes on longer, usually we have a better shot of winning than they do because this is a control deck. So, as the turns go on, they've got fewer cards in their hand. We've got the disinformation campaigns that's letting us draw and getting them rid of cards. And we kind of start working our way through their hand and library. Ritual of Suit is a great one, especially for those really aggressive early decks. There have been games where I'm just digging through my library to find this. A lot of the powerful decks rely on those small, well, not small, I mean, they can get big, but they're only the 2-3 mana cost creatures, and this just wipes their board. And right there is a great reason for people to quit, for sure. Vraska's Contempt is either big creature or planeswalker removal. It's become a lot more important in this new set because so many planeswalkers are being dropped. Great card. Karn is kind of a hit or a miss. Originally, my intent was to make him one of the victory conditions. You can see his -2 is to create an artifact creature that just gets bigger with each other artifact. I don't get to play that. In fact, I don't think I've ever actually won a game playing that strategy. I think more often than not, it's because of the Thieves of Sanity just doing enough damage to them over time and, you know, taking whatever cards that they have that happens. So really, it's more of just a draw card, and then you can choose cards out of your exile if you need to. But I think a lot of the time, people feel really threatened by Karn, so you don't get a lot of use out of him. But he's good to have. You know, that's why there's 2 of them in the deck. The Eldest Reborn is the absolute bread and butter of this deck. Most powerful card in here. It requires the opponent to sacrifice a creature. Then they have to discard a card. And then you get to take a card out of their graveyard and put it on the battlefield in your control. This, if anything, is the victory condition in the deck. It is this one. If there is a big creature that you've managed to kill off with a cast down, or you know, they had to sacrifice it. It can be any creature in their graveyard. If they discarded it, essentially everything in their graveyard can come back to haunt them. And it can be planeswalkers too. So in this new set, again, this is a really, really powerful tool, because those planeswalkers that you've countered, or the only thing you can't do is you can't reach into exile. So in that way, the Vraska's Contempt kind of doesn't work well with this, but really, really good card, and you'll probably see this played once, twice, 3 times in a game that you play. So have them. The rest is just land. The Reliquary Tower is just because I found that I was getting really big hands after a while in the later games. So by that point, you'll probably have the Reliquary Tower to throw down, and it just means you don't have to discard cards. Always better to have options. And the Seraphin Void, I don't know that I'm happy with in the deck, but I kind of like the ability to scry if I get this in the first turn. If I get it and I need a color mana, I'm really ticked off with myself for putting that in there. But I think that's only ever happened once or twice. So we'll go ahead and we'll play a game with this deck. And you can see how it works. It is a really good deck. And I've played quite a bit with it and won quite a few games with it. More, I'd say 70% of games that I play with this deck previously I've won. So we'll give it a test.
Okay. So right out of the bat, we don't have the swamp. So we're missing a black mana. But we have our 2 blues for the Sinister Sabotage, and we have an opening 2 plays. So turn 1 opt, maybe draw the black mana for turn 2 Thought Erasure, or we've got the Blink of the Eye in case we need to throw something back to his hand. In fact, we've got 2 of them. Weirdly enough, these seem to show up a lot, considering that there's only 2 of them in the deck total. So let's go ahead and keep this. Make sure we don't accidentally forget to play our opt. Okay, so it's looking like it's a pretty aggressive deck since it's red. Yeah, this is fine because we can play that actually now with the 2 blues. Or even better, we can search for Azcana. Interesting. Okay. So he has to attack and block. That's okay. Let's, we can take 3, or we can throw it back to his hand and put him off a turn. Or we can search his hand. I want to know what's in his hand. I think being able to see 6 of his cards is a big deal. Yeah. This was probably the right choice. So he's got the Swiftblade Vindicator in there. All of this is going to get taken out if we've got a Ritual of Soot. The Ajani is really nasty. So let's see. So he's got 2 mana and he's got no other mana in his hand. So turn 2 is going to be either him or him. Can't play the haste. Can't play her. And the Ajani is a kind of a ways off. So to be honest, I think this is probably the most annoying thing to deal with. And we can check the land. That's right now. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we need that black mana. Okay, Swiftblade Vindicator, it's no surprise to anybody. Yep, that's fine. So let's go ahead and dig. I think we take the Thief next turn. He's got an aggressive deck, which means we're going to be able to pop some creatures out of his deck. And then we can take 2. Let's just throw... Oop. Kick him back to the hand. Alright. Yep. Didn't draw mana. Let me take 2. Fine. I don't really think that we need this right now, so I'm going to check into the graveyard. Arguable about whether that was a good idea. Let's go ahead and drop the Thief. And let's see what he's got coming out next. Okay, the Vanguard, it's nobody's surprise. Throw that back at him. Save ourselves some life. Nope. He's got double strike. That's why I didn't block with the Thief, because I would have lost him, and that was the whole point in popping him out, was to have him. No, we don't need that. Yes, we'll go ahead and transform him. Nope, didn't need that. So I can spend 3 and draw. I can do it on his turn, which is probably the better thing to do, because this turn, maybe what we get is a... Well, that's not so bad. He loses the mana, which is, I'm sure, kind of frustrating for him. Gives us just a chump block. You know, it's going to be good against the Adenta. And then he's got to spend life to keep it alive, so that's the other thing. We've got both a counter and a draw. So we're well on the way to stabilizing. We know that he doesn't have the 4 mana for either of his planeswalkers. The next thing that can come out is going to be the Legionnaire, which is probably what he'll do. Oh, interesting. I don't know why he would have done that, because I've got this Thief sitting here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, he doesn't get it. So he's just trying to pop creatures out. Now, does he attack? He does. That's fine. We want to block anyway. Spend the life. Keep him alive. Okay. You can't play anything else, so let's go ahead and draw, just so we don't forget. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Okay, so he knows he's in trouble now. Yeah. There's the game. Perfect. That was a good play. Alright, so here's our starting hand. I like the op. We've got the Thought Erasure. We've got all the mana that we need for it. And the Guild Gate is kind of probably want to be our first drop, but we could opt on turn 1. So I think this is a keep. That Thought Erasure is going to be a big deal. We don't need the opt right away. We can save that, get the Guild Gate down, and start building some mana. And then we'll have the 4 on turn 4 if we need it for the Vraskas, depending on what he drops down. So he's playing blue-black, white. Not really sure what to expect with that, so let's go ahead and drop another blue. Let's find out. Okay, so the Assassin's Trophy, the history of Benalia is bad. So it looks like You can play any of this. The Assassin's Trophy is not a big deal. We can bait that out with something like Karn. The Forerunner's Legion is kind of a pain in the ass, but with the History of Benalia, that's going to be an issue. So I think we dump that. Keep the cast down. I think that's good. We can chuck anything we really need back into his hand at the blink of an eye. So he drops 3/2. He's going to get to draw a card. Or what we could do is we could just kick that back to his hand and opt, which I think is what we'll do. So we need... That way he would have spent the 3 mana, didn't really get a lot for it. Has to spend it next turn without it being particularly useful to him. So keep him from drawing the card because we don't have to destroy it then. I don't think that this is going to help us any. I think we need to dig for a Ritual of Soot. So there's it again. So he's got red in there too. Okay, it comes back out. So if he wants this out, I think what we do is we just keep it going back to his hand. Or, yeah, you know what? Let's do that. Let's send it back again and we'll kick so we can draw off of it. So we get some extra value out of that. So he's probably pretty frustrated now. That's 3 of the mana. It's putting him off. So I wonder if he'll dump it again. Yeah. So he wants it down, clearly. He saves the black and green so he can play the assassin, or the assassin's trophy. So we've got 4. I think we force him to draw, puts him behind. He's wasted all this time getting this out to draw if we destroy anything. So we know that he wants to draw cards. Yeah, there comes the Assassin's Trophy. It doesn't stop him from having to do this, and it doesn't stop us from getting a draw. Plus, we get a basic land card. So I'll go ahead and take that action. I'm going to drop out another island. There we go. So we get our draw, force him to discard. Baited out that. I can play again, so we can counter whatever he has coming out next. And then the next turn, we can Eldest. Alright, so we got some mana. Sanctum Seeker. I don't think so. Goodbye. So we don't need the Boneyard. Chuck that. Cool. So we take 3. It's a trade worth having. Got the Ritual. Doesn't even matter because we're just going to go ahead and force him to sacrifice it. So he gets to draw a card off of it. That's fine. He's going to dig up some of those Forerunner's Legions next turn, and then we've got Ritual of Soot, so it doesn't really matter. Oh, so there's another one. And there's the Forerunner's Legion. So I think what we're going to do... Oh. Okay, well, I was going to say we should Vraska his Reaper. I don't think that that's what we're going to do anymore. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt damage, 1/1 counter on him. And then he can deal damage. Cool, so we might actually pick that up when this goes off, which I think is fine. I wonder if we should just play the Dispersal. We could play Karn. He didn't draw any of these, so maybe what we do is we just go ahead and Ritual Soot. He gets 2 cards, that's fine. He's playing on borrowed time anyway. And then let's go ahead and dig, because we've got the mana and nothing to play with it really. Take the Sinister Strike. Throw that out. Or Sinister Sabotage. Man, got World of Warcraft on the mind. Okay, so this is fine. We've got the Vraska's Contempt to get rid of it. So now what are we going to take? I think actually we're going to take the Flying Legendary Vampire. Because why not? Worst case, it baits out something that he's keeping in his hand to get rid of it. Get rid of him. Bish bash bosh. Throw this down. There we go. So we're well in control of this, right? We've got removal, we've got counter, we've got plenty of mana on the field to play anything that we need to play. So now we start building threats. So he can't respond, so now we're responding to him, not the other way around. We get 2 good draws. So he gives us a Vraska because he doesn't want us getting more creatures. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, and then he gives up. So again, it's like the win condition just is irrelevant. They quit before it becomes an issue. This is really kind of the key to this. So there you've got that one. We've got 2 or 3 games probably I'll put up with the video. If you like the video, if you like the deck, if you have suggestions, make sure to leave comments, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and next time I come up with a deck, I'll show you. Thanks.